All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Fragrantica Talks. I am Adam Forziati. I'm joined today by Nicola and John once again. Hello, Nicola and John. How are you doing today?
Good.
Hello.
So, oh man, okay, where to even begin with a topic like this, right? I think the word niche in the fragrance industry is sort of a loaded term, and we're talking today about affordable niche. And that itself is a huge loaded term because different amounts of money mean different things to different people. And that is sort of like the impetus or the part of the reason why we wanted to discuss this today. I know a lot of people are doing some shopping this time of year, but even if you're watching this in June of 2024, it doesn't matter because I think there is this attitude towards niche that it is all expensive and, is sort of like the Whole Foods version of grocery stores where it's just always more expensive no matter what you do, right? And I would push back against that assumption. I think just like any platform or any category of thing, there's, highs and lows of any quality, whether it's quality itself or price. And so I thought it was important that we talk about this today. And I know you two feel at least somewhat similarly. All three of us kind of tend to specialize in the niche and independent perfume scene, although we don't stop there. That's just sort of our broader interest in talking about fragrance. So I'd be curious to know from both of you what you think the parameters of this discussion could be. And John, if we could start with you, I'd love that.
Yeah, sure. This was an interesting topic, and even before we started to talk, I know in chat we were saying, is this about what we're smelling or how it's sort of marketed or price point or what have you? And I think that it could be a little of all of those things. And I know one thing that I raised in beginning of our discussion is that there's certain things that can have a sort of niche-like quality to them in the way that they smell, and yet have a approachable price point. And some might think, well, what exactly does that mean? And I don't have a really fast and ready answer for it, but I would say that there are some fragrances that tend to reach out to the sort of farther corners of the smell world and maybe, specialized in a little bit more obscure ingredient profiles or different accords that try to reach, different sensory parts of our experience, a little bit more experimental, a little more daring, or there may be certain trends that are happening. We all remember when the oud trend started in, like, what was that, about 2008 or so, when everybody sort of jumped on that. And that kind of defined niche for quite a while, where everything had some oud in it. So what I believe you'll see in affordable niche will sometimes be the use of some of those same ingredients, unusual ingredients or usual, but done at a much more accessible price point for people. And that can run across different spectrums, but there'll be some perfume houses that they've been able to find ways to make them more affordable for folks. So I think that's one aspect of it. What about you, Nicola?
So I always think of niche of the kind of original definition of it, which was about fragrances that were in limited distribution. So they weren't available in every country, in every department store. They weren't carried by the massive distributors. So that's how I try and think and still, think about whether something is niche or not. I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. There are cheap, there are ways to get cheap perfume, and potentially even with that niche quality. So, in the UK, some of the fashion houses, like Zara, do very well thought of fragrances that are very affordable. H&M did a line of fragrances, and I think Ben Gorham from Byredo composed some of those for them at one point. Whether they're still in circulation or not, I'm not sure, but you're getting that sort of blurring of lines there immediately. So for the purposes of this discussion, I've tried to concentrate on houses which, as far as I know, are in that more genuinely niche, limited distribution, smaller houses, not available everywhere by, just by dint of the definition of niche. And yeah, so I think there's also a quality thing, because I think we need to talk about fragrances that are high quality, that are well performing, that are, to all intents and purposes, an expensive fragrance, but and there's a variety of tactics here that companies use in order to make them affordable. And I think we'll probably get onto that, but for whatever reason, they are affordable or more towards the affordable end of the spectrum. So to be included for me in this discussion, they have to be both good, and I put a kind of arbitrary limit of £100 a bottle. So I haven't brought anything tonight that is more than £100 a bottle. And many are significantly less than that. I think it's probably a good point in the discussion to, acknowledge that, like Adam started us off by saying, perfume's a luxury. I certainly think of it as a luxury. And I know many people at the moment, particularly, across the world, but certainly in the UK, many people are feeling squeezed. The cost of living is skyrocketing, and perfume has to be, unfortunately, one of the things that goes for people if they're faced choosing between food, heating their homes, and buying fragrance. So, I just wanted to acknowledge that, because I think it is really important, and people will be thinking about, budgeting more over the next few months. Now, for many people, that will mean they don't have to cut out their fragrance budget, but for some people it will. So I just wanted to kind of just almost like put a pin in that, and kind of just acknowledge that it is a privilege to be able to afford to buy perfume. And I feel, I do feel very, very privileged to be able to do that. And I appreciate that not everybody is able to. But hopefully the people that are going to be listening to this are people who can be engaged in fragrance, even though they might be wanting to look for something a little bit less spendy than they have done in previous years.
So I kind of wanted to get ahead of a couple of potential critiques of our methodology here a little bit before we dive in. For example, I know that for me, I chose some houses where they offer smaller sized bottles for a very decent price. And I feel that still qualifies as affordability. And the reason that I want to get ahead of that is because I can definitely foresee some people thinking to themselves, well, wait a minute, why should that count, right? Well, don't we want, full-size bottles or whatever? And to that, I would say, I think there is an obsession of sorts in the perfume community with full-size bottles, right? That 100 ml or at the smallest 75 or 50 ml are like the only ways to buy full-size bottles. And that if a house is charging, trying to cut that size and cut the price at the same time, that's not really giving you any real value, because the price per mil is still similar. I would push back against that logic for a number of reasons. One, I think if we're only focusing on bottle size and not the fragrance inside of it and how it behaves and how much you realistically need to use to be able to have the perfume suit your purposes, then I think we're making an automatic mistake. There are some fragrances where you literally probably only need 1 or 2 sprays to realistically use it and have it perform the way you want to. And that leads me to my second point, that is, I think there is a chronic overspraying habit in the community. I think sometimes 50% or more of the bottles that we're all saying they don't perform the way we want to, it's the result of user error. I firmly believe that if we all took more time to try a fragrance out a little bit more before making a judgment on its performance, we would find that more fragrances perform more like what we want them to do. For example, spraying it on like a wrist and being in an active job throughout the day where the wrist is wafting that fragrance towards your nose, causing you to go anosmic, or simply spraying too much of something and going anosmic to it and mistakenly believing that it isn't performing the way you want it to do. That can be a common issue. And I just want to acknowledge that, the value for your money based on bottle size should go hand in hand with how the fragrance itself performs. Give it a fair shake, because if you only spray it once every time you want to use it, you might find that it lasts a lot longer than if you were to spray it several times every time you want to use it. So I think that I tried to choose, houses that offer smaller sizes for an affordable price, but more importantly, I tried to choose houses whose smaller sizes happen to correspond with the approach to perfuming that I feel they've done a good job at, managing longevity, managing performance, and not making people feel like, okay, I bought this, $65 15 ml bottle of an EDC, right? That isn't designed to last very long. I try to choose houses that have a 15 ml bottle in that example's case of like something that packs a punch and can last a decent portion of the day. So that was just my approach. And also I wanted to point out that in my personal picks, I've sort of started off with houses that kind of do that 15, 30 ml bottle size. And then I'm slowly moving towards houses that just simply have 50 or 100 ml bottles at a really good price, flat out good price all across the board, no matter bottle size. So that was my approach. I'm sure both of you might have, taken that into consideration at some point too in your research for this video, but I wanted to make that clear and maybe try to get ahead of some of the questions that I'm no doubt will be asked at some point.
Yeah, I think, sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Nicola, you're fine.
I think you raise a really good point about bottle size, because clearly bottle size is a tactic that brands use to make some of their scents more affordable, and that's absolutely fine. The question for me comes down to, would I rather have a small bottle of something that I really loved, that if I had a finite budget, say that budget was even, I think you can get stuff for as low as 25 quid, which is about $30, because I checked. I think you say that was your budget. Would I rather have a small bottle from an indie brand that I spray and adore, and maybe I only wear it for special occasions? Or would I rather have a large bottle of a high street fragrance that I spray every day and I think, well, it's okay? And actually for me, the smaller bottle of precious juice from an indie house is what I would go for any day of the week. It would always be quality over quantity for me, and I would rather keep it special. Does that fit with what you're sort of thinking around this is, John?
Yeah, I was going to say roughly the same thing. And actually, it was a great point you brought up, Adam, about the fact that there's a number of vectors here of, in terms of what you actually get out of your spraying experience, like how long that bottle will actually last you, all of those different things. And I think one of the another thing is that what are our actual habits? Like, do we tend to wear fragrance lightly, and in seasonal wear? Like, I definitely don't wear nearly as much in warmer weather than I do in colder weather, things like that. So it's very hard to make this rule, that this size at this price is a good value and this size at this price. I think it's incredibly variable. And so one of the things that kind of came into my mind as well too in this idea of what are good perfume houses or perfumes that are niche and are affordable is, do they have a good sample program, so that you can actually experience the wearing some of them to make a really good informed choice before you actually buy. But that was one feature in this as well too. So yeah, I agree with all of you on that one.
Yeah, I think it's important as well to really underline that fact that, I mean, I don't know what you guys have picked, but for me, certainly, none of these fragrance houses or the fragrances they carry, I would consider cheap. And by cheap, I mean like budget or cut price or poorly made or, you know, just not as prestigious as other houses, that they're all really good, really well-made perfumes in good presentation that does what it should. You know, the sprayers work, the bottles work, they're not plastic bottle, you know, all that stuff that you would expect. And it just happens that for some reason, whether that's bottle size, whether that's ingredients, whether that's availability, you know, all those vectors we've talked about, they're towards the less expensive end of the spectrum. So I don't want anybody to think, oh, well, this is just a you know, podcast about budget houses. It's not. It is about affordability in a way. Well, in many ways, actually, rather than, you know, there's nothing cheap about the scents I'm going to talk about tonight.
Good
even
point.
though they are cheap, if that makes sense.
It's okay.
So, okay, let's get into it then. Nicola, I'm dying to know what your first pick might be.
So, my first pick is, and I've talked about them before, but they are fantastic for affordability. 4,160 Tuesdays. They're a staple, and you all know how much I love a couple of their scents, because I've talked about it before. However, they've made it into this cup because they do these gorgeous little 15 mils, which for many of them, and I have been and checked this today, they're 25 quid for 15 mils of artisanal made, hand poured, you know, hand bottled. Everything about it is handmade, which is, so 25 quid's about $30. Super affordable. And, you know, these are the brands that I think of when, you know, I'm saying I'd rather have one of these that I love than 100 mil of something that I feel ambivalent about. And I think it is part of the ethos of the company. You know, Sarah McCartney is very aware that perfume is a luxury, and she makes a range of sizes in order to cater for people's budgets. They're also a brand that does, periodically throughout the year, it does really good offers. So they have, they generally have a period where you can customize a scent for, it's either free or for a very limited, you know, small extra charge. So if you want a scent that is super lemony, or, you know, a fragrance that you want to add caramel to, she'll do that for you, which is insane. You know, it's wonderfully insane, but the amount of work that must cause the brand is just, you know, it makes your mind boggle. They do things like you can get 3 of the 15 mils for £75. A lot of them, you know, are £25 each. So yeah, there's a lot to recommend them in terms of affordability, and yeah, I just think they're really nicely done. You know, there's some really nice scents. There's a lot of variety there. You know, she's got every fragrance category pretty much covered. Huge catalogue and very affordable. And the bottles, the 15 mils, are so cute. You know, I don't think they're just sort of like, they're very square, they're screen printed, and yeah, they're just lovely. So highly recommend for affordability.
And also accessibility, right? You know, some of those scents can be what I think many fragrance community members might call niche smelling. But I do think there's a certain amount of artistic inspiration that is, you know, broad in range that Sarah McCartney takes inspiration from. I think she has quite an imagination, quite a approach of diverse interests that she brings to perfume making, and I think that there's probably something for just about anybody in her line. So
Yeah.
Talking about making this accessible in terms of price doesn't quite do the house justice either, right? I think she is she is affordable to those who might be curmudgeonly and might not think that they like niche scents, right? She makes enough different types of fragrances where you might find something that you actually do enjoy from her.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree with you there.
Yeah, agreed. And also just the huge catalog that she has, like of fragrances, and I know, and also for people in the States, she has enough distributors in the US that you can get quite a lot of her fragrances here. Aside from in England, of course.
Yeah.
That it's really easy to get her work here. So
Yeah.
yeah.
She also does a thing. So she has a Facebook group that she will say when she's sending a box over to America. So if there's one that isn't distributed in America that you really want to get a hold of, all you do is drop them a line and say, can you send over some of X? And she includes it in the next box, which is just fabulous. And that level of customer service and attention to detail is unparalleled, really. And it should really be commended.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So John, do you have a house that you'd like to talk about? What is your first house? It says a lot, I think, our first choices that we bring to this discussions. I'm curious to know what yours might be.
Yeah. So I was actually really, when you were talking about niche and in some of your concerns about, the definition there and, is it too exclusionary and all that? I actually thought I almost wanted to raise my hand and say, wait, I have a point to bring up. Because I was really excited by something which challenged all my sort of any suppositions I had about niche. And that was when I was in Italy and I discovered this house, which I think we have stuff that's sort of similar to it in the US, not exactly. So this house is called Erbario Toscano, and it's essentially it's a pharmacy in Italy, and they make their own fragrances, and they're fantastic. All of them are fantastic. I have two. One is forgive my Italian's not very good, but Cuore di Pepe Nero, which is black pepper, and Salis, which is essentially like saline or salt water, I think, or salt, essentially. And they make many of these, and they are 100 ml, 3-ounce type bottles. The top price, I want to say, I'm just checking my notes here, is $68. They're usually sold at these pharmacies. And what I like so much about them is that they're completely accessible. Like you can buy them all over Italy, and they tend to be kind of not sort of sullen notes, but they will reproduce like they'll focus on one note, one idea. They tend to be a little bit streamlined, but they're really specialized. They're beautifully made. I loved every one that I smelled, and I really had to stop myself from buying out and bringing a lot back. When a friend of mine was in Italy recently, and he said, what are some good Italian places I should go to? I said, go to Erbario Toscano, because all of their kind of house brand stuff is fantastic. And this is the one I'm most interested in, and I was most excited about to talk about affordable niche, because they represent, I think, the best of all of the different facets we talked about, that they're absolutely affordable. Quality is really high. The ideas behind the fragrances are interesting. Smells great. You still don't feel like you're just buying what anyone else has, that there's something a little bit special about them. And that just checked off so many boxes for me. What they also do, which is fun for some people I know who really like this, is they tend to make a fragrance idea, and then they make it in every kind of format. They'll make a room diffuser, they'll make soaps, they'll make lotions, and so they really they dig in on that scent idea, and they're like, we're really going to scent everything with this thing, which I know for some people they love that, and that's become kind of out of fashion in a lot of parts of the world, but for some people that's amazing. So if you love one particular, like if you like the black pepper fragrance like I do, you can get everything in that black pepper fragrance. Your entire world can smell like black pepper if you want. So that's a huge upvote for me, and really kind of puts a little laugh in the face of the potential pretentiousness of niche, in my opinion. I'm off my soapbox, but I was really excited to talk about them because they're a really, really good brand.
Yeah, that whole Italian approach of, pharmacies, literal pharmacies selling perfume is wonderful, instead of just like pharmacies selling others' brands. It's pharmacies selling their own kind of creation, right? That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, not to stereotype, but it is genuinely true that Italians have to be one of the best smelling nations around. Just spend any time in Italy in the middle of the summer, and it is a constant marvel to me how you'll see men in like three-piece suits who just look crisp and smell amazing. Whereas I'm just like, you know, a sweaty puddle on the floor, being like all red and.
You know, you make a good point, Nicola. I haven't been to Italy yet, but I have always kind of wanted to grow up to be an Italian old man, you know, in that respect at least, right? Like just spiffy, just knowing, you know, how to bring that zest of life to all age groups is just a marvelous thing. I think we could all do to grow up to be an old Italian, right?
Now, what
So
about
that's
you,
interesting,
Adam?
John. I'm gonna get my nose on that house. Thank you for
Yeah,
bringing that one.
absolutely. And there are, you can get them in the US, which is great as well.
Oh, yeah, even better.
Yeah, which is fantastic, which is fairly somewhat recent, if I'm not mistaken. So what about you though? I'm very curious to hear your first out of the gate.
Yeah, well, like I said, I'm going to start, you know, with some of the houses that just offer really good competitive price on 30 mil and smaller bottles. So personally, I actually really like 15 and 30 mil bottle sizes. In listen, you know, part of that is who I am as a person and what my situation is. You know, I'm a reviewer. I do a lot of like writing work. I write a lot about perfume. So I have more than enough bottles to, you know, anyway. I have more than enough samples anyway, right? So like it's never that I need anything else, right? And I think that you could make the case that once you get a couple to a few to like 10 to 20 bottles anyway, right there, you already have way more than enough, right? But and I certainly have more than that. So, you know, I'm lucky, right? And I don't need to, you know, it's not like I need something. So I'm going to try to eliminate my own personal situation from like thinking about this too much, and try to think about this from the perspective of somebody who just wants a decent deal with enough of a fragrance to last a while, to make the purchase feel like it's lasting them a while, if they use it fairly frequently. And I think 30 mil is a good size for that. 30 mil, especially like we said earlier, depending on the fragrance itself, how long it lasts, how it performs for you. You don't always need much more than 30 mil to last a decent amount of time. So certainly I think $67 for 30 mil, if it's something that you really enjoy, is not a bad deal. And some of the houses that I'll talk about have even better deals than that. But the first one I wanted to talk about is Parfums de Nicolai, right? Made by the sort of legendary in our own world of fragrance perfumer Patricia de Nicolai. She offers 30 mil size in American dollars, 67, right? $67 for 30 mil of, you know, these perfumes that are really well considered, right? I know, you know, some of the community might already have some experience with Nicolai fragrances. They're fairly popular among those who have branched out from designer perfumes somewhat, and Nicolai's been around quite a while now. I believe since at least the 1980s, correct, John?
You know, I'm not exactly sure, but definitely pre-2000, that's for sure. So
certainly. So, you know, suffice it to say, Patricia's been doing this quite some time. She's an incredible perfumer. I really admire her work, even the ones that I don't particularly want to wear. And I think that there's something for everyone in her line, just about. So there's value to those who don't have a lot of patience, right? There's value for those who don't have a lot of money. And there's value to those who don't want to go too far into the deep end of weird niche and want to stick with something that is, by all intents and purposes, a little bit more accessible, perfume pyramid-wise, perfume blending-wise. Patricia's style is, I want to say, very refined and fairly French, right? She is French, so that makes sense. But her style is pretty French. And what I mean by that is that I think you'd spray it to anybody in your family who's over for the holidays, right? And I think, you know, most of the people, you know, who are coming over in this pretend situation I've made up are not perfume people, right? And you get, crazy Uncle Harry is there. I'm just making that up. I actually do have a uncle-in-law who's named Harry, so I probably shouldn't have used that name. I like him. No, so crazy Uncle Harold. All right, I changed it a little bit. So crazy Uncle Harold, he doesn't know anything about perfume, right? But if you sprayed just about any one of Parfums de Nicolai's fragrances for crazy Uncle Harold, Harold wouldn't bat too much of an eye. I think Harold would say, okay, this is convincingly a good fragrance, right? Even if he doesn't want to wear it himself. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Parfums de Nicolai, I guess maybe I don't want to, say, I don't want that situation to sound like it's a negative. I think that her line is still creative and pioneering, without being, too weirdly niche. So it's accessible price wise, it's accessible, approach wise. And I think it's accessible simply for those who want something of a daily driver. Many items in her line feel like something you could wear to many different occasions. So I think there's value all around, and coming from an experienced hand. That's how I feel about Nicolai. I don't know how you two feel about the house.
Yeah, I was just going to say quickly, one of the first words that comes to my mind is there's this almost like a quiet elegance to a lot of her work that, particularly when she does things like amber fragrances, leather fragrances, there's like this very and there's this dependability about that I really like. Like you're not going to put on one of her fragrances and be like, oh, I really picked the wrong thing today. You know what I mean? Or something like they're not going to have that experience. And for some people, that's really important, to actually have something that will consistently wear well, right? Like that's going to wear well in a lot of situations. But it's still done with a lot of creativity. And it's definitely not just part of reacting to the mainstream or doing like her own little twist on mainstream or something. Like they're very creative fragrances. So I totally know what you're saying about Uncle, I forget his name, but that guy. And that's good. In some ways, that's really important. Like you don't always want to be just like a billboard for challenging, everybody. And the price point is very, very good for niche work. Very, very, very good.
Mm. Yeah, they've definitely got some strong scents in that lineup. I think you're right. There's a kind of classical Frenchness about them, which I think I don't know. I find it really hard to be objective about this house because I had a terrible experience with a sales assistant in their shop in London.
Oh no!
So it has really coloured my, and you just think. I have a scent of theirs. I have Cap Neroli, which is a really strong example of a very robust kind of classical neroli fragrance. You can't knock it for that. You absolutely can't knock it for that. And if you're wanting a good neroli fragrance, it is an absolute belter. Yeah, I think that's all I'll say on the matter.
That's fair. Yeah, no, totally fair. You can't account for poor customer service, can you? So who would go next? I think we're back to John or to you, Nicola. Either way.
Nicola, I'd like to hear from Nicola, actually.
Okay. I'm going to go a little bit off the beaten track with Label from Label Tenerife. Now, they're not a very old brand. I mention them because they are the fragrances of the house Angela Champagne. Is run by two wonderful people, Angela and Enrico. And they not only compose the fragrances, but they also manufacture and bottle themselves. So they also manufacture for other people. So they're a very well-respected house. Obviously, Angela Champagne has been around for a while. That's their kind of luxe offering. Wouldn't really fit into this discussion. However, I think it was the year before last, they brought out Label, which is their really pared back, really much more affordable. Now, it is a layering concept, so the scents are deliberately simple-ish so that you can combine them to form, your own sort of signature. However, I do like to talk about them because I think they're good enough to stand on their own. I think there are a few houses around now that do this sort of concept, like Bon Parfumeur is one as well. also really good. But the scents, I like them for days where you're just feeling like you want some scent, but you want to chill out. You know, you maybe sat, you know, and it's probably relevant at this time of year. Those days, the crimbo limbo days, where you maybe got your PJs on for most of the day or your tracky bottoms, and you want to feel nice and you want to feel cozy, but you don't want anything too demanding. These are perfect for that, and I will tend to wear them on their own rather than layer them. They retail for €75, or some of them they do. Some of them are slightly more expensive, but the majority are €75 for 50 ml, which works out about $78. So still well under that 100 range. And you know you're getting a quality scent because the house is manufacturing them. You know, they're bottling them. The creative team behind them is the creative team behind the Angelo Champagne. So you're getting, you know, I would say that they are more youthful and much more upbeat than the Angelo Champagne fragrances, which have this kind of gothic sensibility. So don't buy them expecting the same tone as Angelo Champagne. You know, they're light, they're fun, they're fresh. They're just really kind of cozy, comforting, easy, really easy scents, but without being boring. You know, so this one's amber and fig. They have maltol and cinnamon that I particularly like, and spray that a lot on days where I don't really want to wear a lot. They last really well. And there's just this kind of real ease about them, which is nice and very enjoyable, not demanding, but still creative and still interesting.
That sounds great, like a great concept. I do like the idea of the quote unquote sort of easy to wear fragrance, or like the simple profiles. I think there's a really important place for those in fragrance, like really important place for those.
Yeah, I think they're a really great way into fragrance for people. You know, when I was getting into scent, I found that high street perfumes were of a type that didn't necessarily appeal. So if somebody, you know, is kind of starting that journey, actually starting them with something like this is really not a bad idea, because they can experiment with the floral, they can experiment with something really fruity. You're not going to spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars to find, or pounds to find, that they absolutely hate it. But you can almost, because they're pared back, you can start to identify elements that you enjoy really easily. And so you might find that actually it's all the green kind of fragrances that appeal to you. So then when you go back to high street even, or back to a different sort of niche, it's a lot easier for you to hone in. Okay, well, this is what I'm after. So yeah, they're great, and yeah, just really solidly done.
Very nice. That sounds excellent.
Yeah. So yeah, John, what's next for you?
Oh, goodness me, looking around here. So one I like, and I'm wondering if either of you may also talk about this, and this may be an interesting thing for us to discuss, is you mentioned clothing stores, for example, Nicola, and I was thinking about Zara, and I don't know if either of you were going to talk about Zara, but and I think we just ran an article actually about Zara. The thing about Zara that interests me is that for the longest time, I didn't actually smell any of the Zara fragrances, and then one day I just kind of happened into one of their shops in Boston, and I was blown away by how many there were. And I think that maybe their one problem is they produce so many freaking fragrances that, you know, before you know it, they're like, my God, there's hundreds. It appears to be hundreds of them that they make. But what's really interesting about Zara is, first of all, their price points are amazing. They're very affordable. The profiles are fascinating. And for any time you think, well, I don't like that, don't worry, because they've probably done a series that has 5 different takes on the same idea, and one of them will be good. They're almost always. They often will collaborate with people from, you know, high-end fashion world or high-end design world to create things. For example, I'm not a huge fan of Joe Malone, but the Joe Malone collaboration that they did was great, and I have 2 of those, the Fleur de Patchouli that they did with her, and the Amalfi Sunray are really fantastic. These are kind of light, somewhat light fragrances, although the Fleur de Patchouli, if I recall, this is a beautifully like transparent patchouli, which is just gorgeous. And one that I particularly loved is this Cashmere Rose that they created, which again is a sort of simple, sweet rose with cashmere wood. And then my good friend Tanner had given me a couple of their, like a tobacco and a leather. This is, sorry, I'm just checking my notes here, but this is a leather boisé. They tend to do, I want to say, somewhat minimalist, stripped down, almost like laser focused ideas that have really nice sillage, longevity. The quality is high, and I almost want to say surprisingly high for the price point, because generally I've not bought one where I later thought, oh, why did I buy that? You know, that I like the stuff that they make. I think the thing you have to do is you have to go and sort of smell them and pick out something you like, because there is stuff that I didn't find particularly great, and then some that I absolutely thought, this is amazing. This is niche quality work. They're all really affordable. You'll often see stuff that's like at the higher price point, and for them, I think a high price point in the States would be maybe like $70 or $75, $80 or something at the highest price point. They often will discount at various times during the year. So, you know, it's rare that you'll pay like a full price for something. And then they have some classics that they've kept in rotation for a long time as well. But I like their approach. They've really decided to treat fragrance as this kind of like constant experiment, essentially, of different ideas. And that's very niche. That's a very niche concept. And I like the fact that they're willing to try that with their customers. They're not really trying to steer the bus for the customer. They're actually saying, we're going to throw a whole lot of ideas at you, and we know that you'll like some of them, but we'll let you kind of tell us, in a sense, what you like out of all of that. And I like a lot of that approach. I think it's really cool. I really recommend people just go, you know, and Zara's are all over the world, I'm assuming at this point. So, I mean, just go to a Zara and smell, and you'll be very pleasantly surprised at what they have to offer, I think, really.
Yeah, I agree. They are very well thought of in the UK sort of fragrance scene as well. And that combination of them being very well thought of and the price point does make them very attractive, for sure.
I'll admit that a few of their newer creations have shown up on our Fragrantica feed, right? On the little new fragrances tab. And I clicked on them and they go, not expecting much. And then all of a sudden I look at the notes and I look at what people are saying about these fragrances, and I'm like, oh, this sounds pretty interesting, right? Like I've never bothered to go into a store, but now I will. Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah, it's really worth doing. And I was in the same position, Adam, where it's like, it didn't register for me. And then when I finally did experience, I was like, oh, wow, okay, this was something I should have done earlier, you know? So what about you? What have you got next for us, Adam?
Well, so another house that just has quite a few different bottle sizes. I believe they go from 15 to 30 to, I believe, 50 and then 200. And even at the 200 mil level, I think most of their fragrances, you'd think that it'd be stupendously expensive. I think the 200 mil size for most of their line is like under $140, maybe even under 130 for 200 mil. It's pretty good. But the house is Jacques Fath, Fath, and Jacques Fath is really an interesting house because they have like this long history in perfume, right? They've been around for quite some time, and one of their fragrances in particular, Green Water, was historically relevant. I mean, it gets referenced a lot by those who know their vintages, and it's been through several iterations over time. The house is sort of it was purchased a while back to be kind of reinstated after being defunct for a while, I believe. So it's really a fascinating history there, but that's really not why I chose them. I just chose them because they make some convincingly good fragrances for prices like $38 for 15 mil, or even just $60 for 30 mil. That is a pretty decent value. And again, this is on that sort of multi-tiered scale that I talked about. I'm still sort of in the realm of, accessibility from all angles, right? I'm still talking about scent houses right now that are, accessible in terms of the note pyramids and the structure and the actual smells of their perfumes that are not too daring, but are interesting enough and are quote unquote niche enough to make this niche discussion, right? But they aren't so into like pushing boundaries that, they might make themselves inaccessible. I'm still sort of at the beginning of my kind of scale there. So expect a French quality to this house. Expect a French approach, generally speaking, to perfumery. Expect to, again, sort of metaphorically spray this at your party and Uncle Harold isn't going to recoil and just dismay, right? He's not, especially not for something like green water, right? Or Curacao Bay maybe might be sort of, oh, okay, that's sort of relatively accessible. They make quite a few really, decently well-made perfumes. I actually like their Lilas Exquise perfume, which, as you might expect, is a lilac fragrance. Lilac not being a particularly common note in the general designer realm of perfumery. You get a few here and there, but they're just not really something that I think designer houses tend to, go all in on. And Lilas Exquis is sort of all in on that flower. So I appreciate that in and of itself. But no, I've had a decent experience with them. I don't love every one of them, and I don't think all of them are for me, but I think they offer a decent value and quite a few options, right? We were talking before about how, what would I rather do, buy a very tiny amount of something that I really love and wear it every so often, or buy a larger thing that I can wear every day, right, to anything. And I think the cool thing about Jacques Fath is that they certainly give you options to do any of those things, right? If you like one of their scents well enough, wait a while, save up, and buy the comically oversized 200 ml bottle of it, and you'll feel like you've accomplished something, and you'll feel good knowing that you've worn it for a while. You liked the tiny amount that you bought of it for less than $40, and now you're saving up for something to wear it every day, right? Or if you're a person who doesn't really need to wear this purchase every day, that 15 to 30 ml size will suit you and your wallet just fine. So that's what I kind of like about them. They're accessible from all those angles.
No, this is so cool. Oh, I'm sorry, Nicola.
No,
I'm really excited you brought this up. And actually, I looked up the brand here on the site too, because I love green water. I think it's just one of those, and actually I would have brought this brand up for our bottles we love, because I actually think their bottles are just cool, minimal, like they do everything the right way sort of thing. But there's there's one of theirs that I really like, which I do want to get out, Tempête d'automne, which is just, it just kicks ass. It's so good. It's just a really nice kind of ambery aromatic type. But they really do have a lot going on. That's good. That's good. I love how they run the gamut for what affordability, and also the price size, the sizes and the price range. And their samples are really cool too. They come in those little boxes, and I love those little sample package they have, are really awesome. Sorry, go ahead, Nicola.
I was just going to say, my point was much less kind of erudite. Mine was that I'm not even sure I own a 200 ml bottle of anything, and I kind of imagine it's like this big.
Well, so you'd think, but I should probably check before I speak like that. I'm pretty sure they offer a large, like a 200 ml size. I'm just going to look really quickly, and yes, they do. 6.4 ounces of juice. That is quite a lot. But what's really cool, I don't know how they managed to secure a bottle supply company for this. All of their sizes, the bottle design is the same, right? It's sort of like this like narrow cylinder. Now, admittedly, once it gets down to the 15 ml size, it's a squat cylinder, right? It's like a little thing that's about this this tall. It still convincingly feels like a nice bottle though, because like they use nice quality glass, and they keep that bottle design consistent throughout the sizes, which I don't think many houses are capable of doing. So I don't know what kind of bottle magic they secured there, but they certainly did. The 200 mil, based on the photos that I'm looking at here, it looks like it's like this honking like tower, right? Like it's so funny. Yeah, I think I could make some jokes about it, but it's wonderful. It's a wonderful. They were whimsical insofar as they were just sitting at their meeting, probably when they last relaunched the house, and they're thinking like, all right, well, we have this money to burn on bottle supply, so let's really do it, right? Let's offer 15, 30, 50 mil. Yeah, even let's do 200. Let's do it. Yeah.
I like that. Should we do 100? And they're like, nah, that's not big enough. 200.
No. Oh, wouldn't it be funny though if it was more of a concern of like, actually 100 mil is the one size their bottle supplier couldn't do of that shape. Go figure.
That would be very good.
But no, they're wallet and perfume aficionado friendly, and I don't think that they're spoken well enough in the community. I don't think I hear too much about Jacques Fath, and that's a shame. I think they are historically important, and they continue to push some boundaries and make some, like you said, that Tempt du Automne perfume. That's a relatively new one, and so they still have a place in the community, and I think we ought to just give them a little love in this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Shall I bring another one to the table?
Please.
Yes, please.
So this brand, are my most expensive, but they're still under the £100 mark, and that's £100 for 100 millilitres as well. So a lot of the ones I price checked this afternoon were £90, which is about $110 for 100 millilitres. And the brand is Laboratorio Olfattivo, which I find really hard to say.
Good job. Nice choice.
I didn't know the price point of these when I first smelled them, and I thought they were probably 150, 200, if not more, pound per bottle fragrances. They're superb. Vanagloria was massively hyped in the community. Was that last year or 18 months ago, something like that? It's a really, really good vanilla, but that isn't the whole, story of the house. They do fantastic citruses, really zesty, really lively. There's about 1,000,001 of these fragrances, so there's definitely going to be something you like in there. The presentation is nice. It's a kind of cylindrical bottle. It's a really nice lid. There's just nothing that I can fault them on, and I think that kind of, they don't do a whole range of bottle sizes, perhaps that. But when you're getting 100 ml for £90, I think that's, it's still on that good value spectrum. And they have really got some fantastic scents within that smell a lot more expensive. There's definitely no compromise there on quality, longevity, silage. They're absolutely bang on in terms of everything else.
It's one of those brands that I never got around to smelling, and I can't wait to. I actually think that they're going to be at Scent Explorer when I go next week while I'm recording this. It's late November, so that's going to be interesting for me to try to just immediately seek out when I'm on the floor there. Something that you say that really excites me is that they do excellent citruses, and I think we could all use an occasional citrus bomb in our lives. And that sounds like it might maybe start to fill a hole that has been created in my life when Atelier Cologne left the United States in terms of distribution. I'm still a little bit mad at them for that, and I don't really know what's happening at the company. So, shaking my proverbial fist over here. And something too that you mentioned about their price range is that it sounds like they're a much, much better value per dollar than Atelier Cologne ever was. Admittedly, I always felt that even though a few of Atelier's creations really caught my heart, I was a little bit surprised that they were priced in the way that they were here in the US. So, that sounds like Laboratorio Olfattivo is sort of something for me to get my nose on as soon as
Yeah,
possible.
I would say so. Yeah, I think you'll enjoy them.
Yeah, I was thinking very much they would be a great brand to talk about today. So that I'm glad really glad you brought them up, Nicola. It's a great, everything I've smelled from them I've enjoyed, and I've only touched the surface of how much stuff they have. And also there's something, I don't know, we could be opening a Pandora's box here, but there's something kind of unpretentious about them too. Like I feel like they're a little understated,
Yep.
both in their marketing and like they in everything, which I've always found that intriguing, brands that you actually feel like you're discovering them a little bit, like, whoa, look at this thing that was in the back of the shelf or something, that hasn't quite gotten, that isn't totally flashy and crazy, and and I sort of like that about a brand that's not outrageously expensive, doesn't have this crazy marketing campaign. Like it's interesting about them. Yeah, they're kind of stewing in the pot in the back of the stove, which is really neat.
Yeah, they are. They're a cool brand, and like you, I've only smelled, a slack handful probably. A percentage of their, I don't know, they must have something like 30 cents, if not more. And I've probably smelled less than 10. But there's a lot to enjoy there.
Yeah,
So yeah, really good one. I really like. Over to you, John. I think you're next.
I am. So I have one that's kind of a little surprising, because I realized upon doing some research that this is an interesting part of this kind of a podcast is, as you do some research, you're like, okay, this is actually less expensive than I thought, or or the price point, or this meets our criteria better than I thought. A brand that I think that I've gone through life assuming was more expensive than I originally thought is, and we mentioned before, is Etat Libre d'Orange, which is actually not outrageously expensive, and it does fit in a slightly higher price point than, and it might be my most expensive here. But upon looking, their prices are different depending upon where you buy them, and you can buy them from their sites in the US. They have 50 mil and 100 mils. So right there, that's going to give you a broader range. But from my looking around generally, you can get smaller bottles, and they even have the really small bottles, which are still quite, I think they're about 10 or 15 mil, and those are great for testing. And those are very, very affordable. But you're still talking about $75, I think, at your low point, which is still very much in the affordable range for the smaller bottles. And even for your larger bottles, you can get some of these at about 120 or 130. So you're still not talking outrageous for that size. And of course, these many of these are very edgy and very niche, and some would say these are one of the defining niche brands in a way. I mean, it does have slightly bigger distribution than some of the smaller ones, but I was kind of pleasantly surprised to remember that, this is still a very approachable or accessible brand, I should say. Like you can get their fragrances and get the small sample bottles, or even get sample kits from them, and absolutely not break the bank. And of course, you have a good mixture of some of their classic, crazy fragrances that people, argue about today, like Rien or Sécoche Magnifique. Some of the things that people love, like Fille de Dieu is one of my absolute favorite of all time. There's a whole range from like the completely chaotic and nuts to the more sort of traditional, more type floral perfume approaches that they've done with some of the more recent things they've done. But they've also kind of gone into some more kooky, collaborative type things. So they've really run the gamut, and they've been around for quite a while now. But I think it's also a good way to look at, because they've covered so much ground olfactively, getting a set of samples or small bottles from them is a great way to just like kind of dip your toe into what the heck is the niche world been doing, and really get a good cross section, I think. So yeah, that's my next brand, which was a surprise for me. I didn't expect to find them in this conversation.
Mm. Yeah, they're an interesting brand, aren't they? Some of their scents are really, it almost feels like they've done the wild. Now they're doing the sort of more, like you say, more collaborative, slightly quieter, recent releases.
Right.
But in and amongst them, there are some real standouts, like Fat Electrician.
I was just going to mention Fat Electrician. Yeah,
it's bonkers.
It is, but you know what is funny about it is that I gave a bottle to a friend as a gift, and of course they thought it was really funny. But they said to me, this is actually a very beautiful fragrance. I mean, this sort of very earthy, patchouli-ish vetiver type thing. And then this, whipped cream smell I mean, it's this crazy combination of things, but it's a very beautiful scent. Like, I really like it's this weird mixture, but it's still a very successful perfume. And I thought, yeah, it is true. Like, it's not like they've made completely unwearable things. I mean, maybe Desecration Magnifique put aside, they still make things that are essentially wearable, I think. Even though they're challenging and weird sometimes. And I agree that they've probably gone a bit softer in their approach. Although I kind of challenge that too sometimes, because I think people were very excited by just like how weird their campaigns were. Like, I thought I Am Trash was actually a pretty crazy campaign. And I loved that fragrance. I thought that was very edgy and interesting in the fact that it used refuse as its components, things that were thrown away by the perfume industry. That was a very edgy concept. But I guess it wasn't as cool as some of their other ones, but anyway, I still think they have life in them. So
yeah. And Herman, it's not just called Herman, but it's about 2 sentences of a title, but I just call it Herman because my French. It's a really good dark green fragrance, isn't it? It's a shadowy green. It's undergrowth rather than sort of spring greens in sunshine. And there's something I find incredibly compelling about that scent. I almost don't want to wear it, but I just want to be able to have it on a blotter and sniff it throughout the day, just because it evokes something, it takes you somewhere. And I think if their fragrances were characters, they're very well drawn characters. They're very, very characterful characters. They're very well conceived. And yeah, I think it's interesting to see that brand's development and how they're moving forward, because presumably a brand can't just exist on challenge alone. There has to be more wearable scents in order to bring them to a wider audience. I haven't tried their most recent, but I certainly think the back catalogue is worth diving into, because they've got a lot of scents, haven't they? So there's probably going to be something in there that you'll like.
Okay.
Yeah, if anything, I remember reading people, if they had one complaint about some of the new scents from ELDO, we'll call them ELDO, is that some of the newer ones have been a little less interesting, and I think that kind of ties back into this niche discussion, right? Where maybe some people who wear exclusively designer perfumes would see those kinds of comments and think, yes, that's the niche snobbery right there, is calling these things that are more mass appealing too simple or too plain or whatever. And I don't always see those comments in that way. I sometimes think that it's just perfume people are kind of weird, right? We're kind of an exception to the rule. And the fact that we take fragrances seriously at all is saying more than the average person who's not a part of the community. And I think sometimes you have these community drama dynamics that play into it too. But ELDO is kind of like, while Prada and Chanel and Dior do their very sterilized campaigns and very yes, we are this house, we are a legacy brand, and anybody can wear our scents as long as they have about 60 to 70 bucks to throw out there, and we want to make sure we're appealing to as many people as possible. ELDO is kind of like the snickering, sarcastic Frenchman in a corner who's horny and smokes too much cigarettes, right? Like that's sort of ELDO in a nutshell. And so I think there's always a place for that. And I think they kind of, in their own respect, embody what niche has been, at least at one point in time in the perfume community. So that's respectable enough to bring them up on the whole.
Yeah.
Well said. What else you got?
Well, you have to have fun with these things, don't you?
That's right.
Who next?
You.
Oh, me. Okay, wonderful. So I'm going to kind of slightly move away from the types of houses I was talking about before, which are still fairly French in their overall approach to perfume. And now I'm going to move towards the house of J Scent. J, I believe, simply referring to the fact that they are a Japanese brand who covers Japanese-inspired topics. And so I'll say that, and you might have a certain set of ideals or a certain set of creative influences that you immediately think of. But I think the cool thing about J Scent is that still they have something for just about anyone, right? They're definitely true to their identity as a creative entity, but they make a few scents, and all of those scents kind of cover different aspects of perfume, and I kind of really think that that's silently brilliant, right? They are subtle in terms of their presence in the industry. They are subtle in terms of how they approach scent making. But what's really cool is that they have something for everyone. They really do. So, for example, they have an oud perfume. They have a leather perfume. They have a cafe-based gourmand. They have some, bigger florals, complex florals. They have a simple kind of homey gourmand that's a little bit more niche in terms of its approach to perfuming, but is still comforting, like a honey and lemon fragrance. They have a solo note floral, hydrangea in this case. They have a soapy perfume that really actually builds on the soapy genre in ways that might surprise people who don't generally like soapy fragrances. They have a fun, playful, sugary sweet. They actually have two fun, playful, sugary sweet perfumes, one of them based on a type of Japanese soda. They have an out there gourmand in the way of a roasted green tea fragrance that is one of the best tea perfumes I've ever smelled. They have their take on a fougere that's like really interesting and eucalyptus based. They have something for everyone. And they even just have like a general woody perfume that I think any there's like a certain subsection of perfume buyers that are like men who just want something kind of woody and lasts a long time. They have something for them too, right? They have something for everyone, and they're really inexpensive. They're I believe, they are 50 mil. So by all means, something that I think most perfume buyers, whether they're in the community or just general day-to-day folks you'd catch on the street, I think 50 mil is a safe size, right? I think we all know that 50 mil is a quote unquote full size bottle, and we've all accepted that, right? Their 50 mil is only about 80 bucks. So, that's pretty good. That actually competes with the Pradas of the world, with the Chanels of the world, with the Diors. 80 bucks for 50 mil of something that's like really well made. I think probably about as good as you're going to get in either design or niche, right? I mean, like it's a pretty approachable budget. They also have pretty good sample sizes. They're available through the Lucky Scents and through other distributors as well of the world. I have nothing but positive things to say about them. I've smelled multiple of the line, and each one I thought was really interesting and unique in the market, and has like its own place in the market. Feels like it belongs here, feels like it's not a copy of something that came before it, while also being approachable and friendly enough to appeal to many different kinds of people. So I have nothing but wonderful things to say about them outside of their affordability, but I wanted to bring them up here under this topic of affordability, because 80 bucks for 50 mil, pretty good.
I'm afraid I'm going to be spending some money this evening, literally, because I jumped to the site, and this is fascinating. I'm totally, the concept is wild. They really cover a huge amount of interesting. I mean, I noticed one here called Mother of Pearl. That's wild. There's one here, sumo wrestler, based on like the hair oil they wear or something. Like these are very subtle and strange concepts. This is wild stuff.
I have and love Sumo Wrestler. It's
Is
a
it
very
good?
interesting
Okay.
take on the fougere. In fact, we did a video once, John, where we talked about fougeres, and I brought up Sumo Wrestler in that discussion. So
I didn't realize that. Okay, wow.
yeah, no, J
Yeah.
Scent, they are great. And another thing they have is they have that your skin but better kind of smell scent too. So they literally, it's not like their concept is super high and niche and you know, looking down on the masses with a nose pointed up. It's actually really approachable. They make any kind of fragrance, right? But they do it through their own identity and through their own kind of smaller concept. And you know, what more could you want from a brand, really? They are earnest creators of good fragrances. What more do you want?
Yeah, sounds great. I'm sold.
Yeah, wild idea. Really cool.
They do have a really good yuzu scent too, by the way, for yuzu lovers. I'm sure that's going to raise somebody's eyebrows. So just had to throw that one out there too.
Yeah.
Nice. Wow, that's really nice.
So who next?
Yeah, who is next?
I think it's me again.
So
yeah, my last one. This is the last one I've brought. Affordable, predominantly in terms of bottle size, because their standard is 30ml. It's Gallivant, so their 30ml they're generally about £65, which is about $80. But I think if you're wanting to go for something that is a good niche standard, this is a brand that you're going to want to investigate, really, because all their scents are themed around different places, different cities actually. So there's like a London and a Berlin, and the latest one's Abu Dhabi. The scents they tend towards the quieter side, but I think that is just really the preference of the brand founder. And I think it's an unfair criticism, really, that sometimes gets leveled at them, because, you know, as we've said, not everything needs to be really loud, really in your face. And where they're quieter, they're quite detailed. You know, they feel like scents where things have been very deliberately placed within the composition. They're definitely giving that niche vibe. They're definitely giving that niche feel there. And they've got enough invention about them to keep you interested. And yeah, I don't know, I just really like them. I think the presentation's nice. Naples is one of my favourites, which is kind of bright in the start and then becomes this lovely, really kind of addictive incense fragrance as it wears. And you know, it's hard to say whether they whisk you off to the place that they try and, you know, draw inspiration from. Because when I went to Naples, I had a pizza under a kind of gazebo. I didn't smell any nice incense, but perhaps if I had, it would take me there. I don't know, there's something really thought out about them, and the Nick, the owner of the brand, pays a lot of attention to detail, to every aspect of that. Plus, you know, like you, Adam, I like a 30ml or a 15ml because I don't want to necessarily commit to 100ml that, you know, isn't going to get used because it's vying with so many other scents. So yeah, just a really good solid brand that comes under that affordable category.
Yeah, I like what you have to say about Gallivant. I think they're very approachable, and I also found that, you know, you just tend to gravitate towards some of the profiles more. Like I like their Amsterdam fragrance quite a bit. That's just really, it's very breezy and pleasant, and there's something about it I really liked. And I think they kind of use, my feeling about it is they sort of use the locations as sort of creative jumping off points to create something, not necessarily like a depiction of a place, but which is an interesting approach, and
I think you're probably right there. Yeah,
I like that idea.
Yeah, cool. So have you got another one for us, John?
Yeah, I'm curious. How many do you have left, John? I'm curious to know.
I brought a whole bunch of stuff, but just to be prepared. But I think what I'd like to end on, because I think it's an interesting story. They're easy to get in Europe, not probably as easy to get here, but that's still okay. I think they can be gotten. Is a brand that's really well known. I'm focusing on a lot of Italian brands today, but it's a brand called Cale. And I think for Italian viewers, they'd say like, oh yeah, Cale, I know them. They used to operate under a different name. I can't remember the exact name before, but anyway, it's Cale with an accent aigu. And it's Cale Fragranze. And they have an enormous profile of fragrances. They're very affordable. I just want to check my so the most you'll pay for like 100, I think it's 100 ml bottle, let me check, would be like 105 euros, but these are very, very good niche scents. They are a little bit on the edgy side. This one in particular that I like, Roboris is one of them. They tend to focus on sort of in some unusual accords, like this one has a cactus accord in it, along with some vetiver and violet leaf and whatnot. They also do an interesting project where they create music for each of their scents. So they've done this sort of collaborative, like each fragrance has a piece of music that's written specifically for it. So diving into their whole kind of world, the world of Cale, is interesting because they really want to bring you on a bit of a trip, like a multimedia trip with these pieces. They're peculiar, but again, in that sort of Italian way, really wearable. Like you just really smell good wearing these Calais. So like every one of them I tried on and I was like, damn, these all smell so good. So you can buy directly from their site, and they'll ship within Italy and the EU. There are a couple of places that will distribute within the US. Kind of hit or miss, but particularly for people in the US, if you want to buy them, you can certainly I think there's a couple Italian places that sell them that ship to the States, so they also sell through a few distributors. But to a lot of people in Europe, Cale is a really well-known brand. They're like, oh yeah, Cale, I know their fragrances. But they remind me a little bit of Erbario Toscano, because they're kind of like a localized brand that's doing niche really well in a sense. And I think maybe Italians are good at that. I don't know. Maybe that's a thing that they have a good localized hold on. They with penetration, but that's my last bit. What about you, Adam? What have you got first?
Well, so I had actually three more, but I didn't have too many remarks to say about each one, so I think I can condense it to a convincingly short time frame here. So the first one is just sort of a hallmark American niche house, something I think many of us have already heard of, Imaginary Authors. We've talked about them before. Now, listen, $95 for, I believe it is 50 mil size. Yes, 50 mil. Again, pretty good. This is the most expensive house that I brought here today, and it's still under $100. So I think that's pretty good. One thing I will say is that Imaginary Authors tends to put random fragrances on sale throughout the year. And I think when they do, you can get it for something like 78 to 82, something maybe a little bit more, a little bit less. I'm not sure. They take off at least 10 or more percent off the price right there. So right away, they're a pretty inexpensive niche house. Their prices have stayed pretty much the same for quite a long time, which is respectable in and of itself. What can I say about imaginary authors that many of our viewers or readers wouldn't already know? They are a very important house to the history of American perfumery. They've certainly been around quite a few years now, almost 10 years, I believe, which in the American perfume scene is actually a considerable amount of time. I think why I wanted to save them for last is just that I think just like ELDO has that place in the French niche scene, I think Imaginary Authors has a similar place in the American niche scene. They are sort of something that I think everybody kind of comes to at some point. And they make perfumes that by and large are incredibly friendly and accessible. They have their really quirky ones. Bull's Blood is certainly not for the faint of heart. But I think most everybody can find something in the line that they'll at least smell and go, oh yeah, that's really nice, right? Like maybe it's not for everybody, but I think most people can find something that they'll enjoy in that line. They are a slow releasing house. They don't pack in the releases. I think they are even slower to release perfumes per year than ELDO is. They really take their time and try to perfect each scent. And I think that shows in the quality of each one. They have like this schism, I think, that's kind of fun in their line between scents that are like more brooding and a little bit more serious versus perfumes that are really like sweet, playful, fun, like just like, you know, gloriously jubilant, right? And there's something to be said for that artistic range, and there's something to be said for all the while keeping every one of their scents, for the most part, pretty accessible and you know, considered. They're not throwing out any B perfumes, really. I think you can earnestly say that everything they release feels like it was considered, feels like it went through many drafts, and feels sort of smoothed over in that respect. So I really respect them for that. I don't love every Imaginary Author scent, but I certainly think that there's something for everybody in their line, and I really respect them. So $95 for 50 ml, it's pretty good, especially when you can get it on sale too. The two others, something a little bit more niche in terms of the compositions themselves. The House of Olympic Orchids is something to consider. That's another kind of really indie kind of house, insofar as they're made by this scientist and professor out in, I think, Washington State, who has many other interests in you know, hobbies that she pursues in her life, but she also makes really great perfumes. Something I want to qualify them as a little bit more niche in terms of their composition, just because some of their compositions are a little bit more like kind of like out there in terms of, at least when you compare them to something like Parfums de Nicolai, right? That are making these kind of safer, quote unquote, safe French style perfumes. I think Olympic Orchids is a little bit more atmospheric, a little bit more boundary pushing, but not in any kind of negative way. Olympic Orchids perfumer is also the perfumer who made the original bat from Zoologist, right? So there, in and of itself, you know, that's the kind of talent that we're talking about, the kind of style that we're talking about. Olympic Orchids prices are pretty great. $65 for a 30 ml and only about $35 for 15 ml. And I think her full size, you know, quote unquote full size, I consider 30 mil full size, like I said, but her 50 mil or 100 mil sizes are not that expensive either, considering. But I think that there's a lot of value there, and certainly some great scents to check out. I would recommend Woodcut from Olympic Orchids if you like woody scents with a twist. And then finally, I wanted to end on sort of my random Hail Mary weirdo pick, right? An uncommon pick. They're not really a perfume house, actually. They are a magazine, Lanez, that's not the right way to say it, N-E-Z. It's a great publication, really serious, long-form journalism, but with approachable layout, fun layouts, interesting topics. If you haven't read a Nez issue and you're a real perfume lover, I would suggest that you find them as soon as possible. You can buy them very easily in the States. It's a great magazine. They also do this really fascinating thing where they'll once in a while release what they call the 1-to-1 or 1+1 project, where they'll have a perfume created for a specific issue of the magazine. in somewhat limited runs, but in my experience, they tend to re-release them sometimes if they sell out too quickly. So you can get them for a fairly long amount of time if you're interested in them. I bring them up. Why? Because they are great to pair with the magazine, and you can buy the one-to-one series with their corresponding issues of the magazine altogether, 15 mil of perfume and magazine for $65, and you're getting hours of entertainment and enjoyment from the 15 mil of fragrance. You're getting hours of entertainment and enjoyment from these fairly thick magazines that are, a little bit larger than your American counterstand magazine. I think that's a wonderful value, but you don't have to buy the magazine either. The perfumes stand on their own, and they're sold on their own as well for only about $35 for, again, it's a 15 mil, so it's a smaller size, but they're all really interesting. They're very experimental. They push some boundaries. They're there to say something atmospheric and interesting about perfume itself. And if you're a real perfume nerd, like I'm sure we all are, right? Like, I think they're really interesting and worthy of exploration. And you can do so, importantly, for a very small price. So there you go.
So I'm gonna pose a question for you. You know I like to do this, don't you? I'm gonna pose a question to you both. Not that I'm going to do this, by the way. If I were to give you 50 quid, so about $60, what from tonight's scents would you be taking home, or would you be going to straight to add to your cart?
Well, if you were so generous to give me 20 more, it would have been a J-Scent scent very easily. I only have one of their fragrances, but there are like at least 3 in their line that I'm just like, oh yeah, I really want to get that. I don't need it, and I probably don't have to buy it, but I really want it. It's really nice. So if you had only given me $20 more, no. I think for that price bracket, I'd be coming home with maybe a Parfums de Nicolai, maybe a Jacques Fath, perhaps. Yeah, let me narrow it down and just say like one solid answer, because that's what you're asking. I'd say probably a Parfums de Nicolai. Maybe Queer Cuba Intense, to be specific.
That was good. I like that you started very broad and you narrowed it down. So well done.
I convinced myself to follow your actual prompt, yes, and play nice.
What about you, John?
So I have to say, I'm just so taken with both of you have convinced me that there's some great stuff out there, which is really cool. So I'm not even interested in my ideas now, and I would spend that money on, like, you can get some great samples from J-Scent here. So I could get at least like 6. I could take it's about 1-to-1 on pound right now, right? I think just about.
Yeah. It's $60 is about 50 quid.
Yeah. So I could get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I could get 9 fairly good sample bottles from J-Scent for that money right now from their site. So I would do that, because I'm now totally convinced that I want to get J-Scent stuff. So that's very simple. That's what I would do.
What about you, Nicola? How would you spend it?
I'm going to 4,160 Tuesdays, and I'm going to get Sexiest Scent on the Planet, 15 ml for 25 quid. And then my second 25 quid, I'm going to buy Captured by Candlelight from them, which I think is also, I mean, I might be wrong that that second one's 25 quid, but for the sake of argument, let's say it is. So, I'm going to get 2, 15 mils.
Because you brought up that house so early, I almost forgot about them. But how could I? Because that's a very you've made my decision a little bit more complicated.
Actually, no. I'm going to take that out. I'm not going to get Captured by Candlelight. I'm going to get Hammersmith Tea and Biscuits.
Oh, I have one of the. It's funny that you mentioned that. I have like a little 15 mil size of it, and I think it's wonderful. Whenever I'm in the mood for a gourmand, it's hard to steer my hand away from Hammersmith Tea and Biscuits.
Yeah, fab.
Amazing, great question though.
So, I mean, listen, I think at the end of the day, I hope that we've convinced everybody, not that our aim was to tell you how to think or anything, but I do hope that we've convincingly, I'll put it that way, convincingly said, hey, there are some options for you out there. If you're a person who assumes that niche is only for the those who have well-lined wallets, I beg to differ. I think we can very easily prove that that's not the case, and very easily these are only a few of the houses that we brought today. There are more, and maybe we'll go in the comments once this is posted and leave some more houses for you to look at too. But I certainly think we've given everybody a great start if you aren't aware that there are very affordable niche houses out there. And I hope that we've covered this topic sensibly and considerably enough so that we're taking into consideration multiple budgets, multiple approaches, and fan types, right? The people who like fragrances have very diverse interests and very diverse desires that they want out of certain scents, right? Some people like light and airy, some people like heavy fragrances, but some people like fragrances that last all day, and others don't really care about performance. And I think we did a great job at covering a gamut of houses that make different styles of perfume to cover just about any desire. So I'm proud of that insofar as what we've talked about today.
I would only add that like what I like about this topic so much is that there's so much to learn from, and I'm inspired by all the stuff that both of you brought to the table, and it makes me more inspired to say I want to investigate this more. Like and so I look forward absolutely to comments from people, and it gives me it fills me with a good feeling that any notions about exclusivity or limited access to this interesting and slightly off the beaten path realm of fragrance is accessible from many different points of view. And I'm excited by that idea that there's a lot of room to explore there.